Hi guys. So, hey, it's been a while. So I started my weekly book review series and it's been about 3 weeks, if not more, since I started it, and I haven't done any more videos. And this is why. I got in a car accident. Yeah, so I got rear-ended. I got whiplash. I didn't have any major injuries, but after a couple of days, I could tell something else was wrong because I could not concentrate and I was getting headaches and they weren't responding to my migraine medication. So I finally figured out that it was a concussion, basically. Concussion-like symptoms. I could not do anything, including reading, especially reading, for very long, without getting a monster of a headache. And so I don't know if you've had a concussion before, but basically the way to heal is to stop doing things, which is really frustrating. ah! So, yes, life happened, and I have not been able to read very much. And so, yeah, it's almost a month later, and I'm finally getting back to kind of normal. Um, so, I have listened to a couple of audiobooks, and I finally finished this one book that is one of the ones I bought when I started this series. So I'll show you that and I will talk about that. So 3 books today, 2 audiobooks, and one reading normally book. So yeah, let's get started. Okay, so let's start with the paper book that I read. This is the one that I read. I Remember You. This is the one I got used, and I was so happy because it was such a deal. And it says a ghost story. That sounded fun. But winner of the Icelandic Crime Fiction Award. Maybe that should have been a red flag. Because, okay, so I don't like reading a certain type of, like Norwegian, Icelandic, that area, a certain type of crime fiction, like Wallander. I would never read that. I've watched the show, but that was painful enough. It's just so dreary. It's not that it's too scary or dark. I could deal with that, but it's so dreary. Just like on a day-to-day life basis. And that's kind of what this was like, or it ended up being like that. Now, maybe if I hadn't had a concussion, I would have kind of realized this at an earlier point in the book and thought, "Oh, I don't want to read this," and stopped reading it. But I guess because I thought, "Oh no, it's just the concussion that's making me feel yucky about reading this book." No. I wish I hadn't read it because I got so far that when I felt better, I was like, I have to finish it because I want it resolved. I want to know, why these things are happening. Um, and so I had to finish it, and it was not satisfying. First of all, it doesn't resolve until like the last 30 pages of the book. The book is 300 and something pages, so it's like the last 10% of the book, maybe, that it resolves. And maybe there were clues along the way that I would have seen more clearly um, if I didn't have a concussion, and then it would have been more satisfying, but I don't think so. I just feel like there were not enough clues for the reader to enjoy kind of a building up of things coming together, because when I got to the end I was like, oh, I did not see that coming at all. So it was frustrating and not satisfying, and I won't be reading this author again, I think. um, just the whole creeping dread I did not like. Well, let me tell you about the plot. Okay, so first of all, it alternates chapters between two different groups of people. One is a group of three people who have gone to this, not exactly an island, I guess it's like a peninsula, but you have to take a boat to get there. Um, and it's kind of an abandoned town, at least most of the year. And one of the three guys, okay, so there's a couple and then their friend. And it was going to be their friend's husband too, but he died suddenly recently. So it's just the three of them. And they're working on renovating this house that they bought without seeing it, I think, um, thinking that it would get them out of financial trouble to like make it a bed and breakfast or something like that, or a hotel, or something like that. um, it quickly becomes clear that they don't know what they're doing, um, as far as working on the house. And it seems like every project that they start, there's something in their way that makes it not work, or they didn't bring the right supplies or whatever. And so they're not making much progress, and they're staying there for like a week, I think, um, on their own with no electricity. Nobody else is in the town, so they're all by themselves. It's, well, I was going to say it's winter, but maybe it's always winter there. I don't know. It's cold, and so they just have like a wood burning stove to try and keep them warm in the house. And then weird things start happening right away, like these crosses appear in the house. Crosses, like big wooden crosses like you would put on a grave. And uh and then there's like a puddle of water and a pile of seashells in the living room, and there's like wet footprints, and they think somebody's breaking in, but all the doors are still locked. So it's obviously a ghost, but they don't want to admit that. Um, and there's a weird dynamic going on between the three people. It's like there's Leaf, who um, seems like a whiny, spoiled brat who doesn't want to do any work. And she's the one whose husband recently died. Um, and then there's Gardar and Kristen, I think. And they are a couple. And she's like, Kristen is like going along with Gardar, even though she pretty much thinks that this whole thing is a bad idea, and that it's not going to get them out of financial debt, and that he's been making bad decisions about money for a long time, but they don't seem to communicate about it. So they're not communicating well with each other. And then Kristen gets hurt. She gets like pushed down the stairs, and it seems like it's a ghost, but nobody's saying that. They're like oh, somehow the door, it flew open from the wind and hit you, and that's why you fell down the stairs. And so she keeps getting banged up like this. And then there's a boy, the only person they've seen on the island, and they think he looks like a small child. He doesn't look like a teenager, who might be pranking them and messing up the house. But they think it is him. Eventually, they have to come to that conclusion because there's no one else around. But they can't get to him. They can't catch him. And Garter keeps trying to catch him. And the women are like, no, don't. Just leave him alone. Because, they'll see him like 100 yards away. And he's always like this, like has his head down, and they can't see his eyes. And it's kind of creepy. And just the way his body language, the way he's standing is very weird. Not like a normal alive person would stand. I don't know. So there's all that weirdness happening. And then over on the mainland, I guess, in a town called Isafjordur, there is another main character. This is, the alternating chapter, Freyr, and he's a psychologist. And his story is like he's divorced from his wife, not a good separation. Their son disappeared like a year, I think it was a year before, or maybe it was a couple years. Anyway, it's like 1 to 3 years ago, their son disappeared. And, he was just missing and he was never found. And he's kind of accepted that their son is probably dead. His wife or ex-wife has not accepted this. And she's gone to like mediums and, done crystals and things like this. Anything, she's desperate to find out something about their child. What happened, get some kind of, not closure, but just the not knowing is horrible. So both of them are pretty miserable, apart. And so he has this case that he's involved in with the police where a school was attacked, and there's all this graffiti, and they like trash the schoolrooms, and they find out, I forget exactly how, but they find out that there was a similar attack on this same school like 60 years ago. One of the older people that he's treating talks about it, I think, and it sounds eerily similar to the attack that just happened. And so, there's like some connection with this past attack, and turns out there's another boy who went missing the same age as his son. And so he has to talk to all the few people who are left from that class when the school was attacked 60 years ago. And he's finding out like the boy went missing, and then most of his classmates are dead now, which, that doesn't seem unusual. But when he looks into how they died, there are all these like horrific accidents. Like one woman somehow falls in her garden and her gardening shears go into her eyes. Just really gross. Um, and so he starts trying to put these things together, even though it's very weird that they would be connected. And it's like he has to acknowledge that there's something otherworldly going on, and he doesn't want to acknowledge this. He thinks maybe he's going crazy. He sees his son in the hall at work, and his son says something to him, and it's just all creepy and dreary and dread and too long, way too long, drags it out. Um, let's see if there's anything else. Yeah, so I guess there's not a lot else I want to tell you about it. I mean, I just felt like it dragged on forever. Um, I do have to, give you the disclaimer that I did have a concussion. So that may have probably affected my possible enjoyment of it, but I really did not enjoy it. And when I finished it, I was like, okay, that's done. Uh, not not a sense of accomplishment or enlightenment or even entertainment. So, thumbs down on that one. Okay, now I want to tell you about a book I listened to on audiobook that I really enjoyed. Now, this is an author that I have read before. I've actually seen him at an author talk too. His name is Nick Petrie, and the book is The Breaker, and it's part of a series. It's the sixth book in a series about Peter Ash, who is a war vet, like the Afghanistan war, I think. So, a recent war vet. And he's got PTSD in a way that makes him claustrophobic anytime he's indoors. And he does the thing where he has to like find all his exits. Whenever he's indoors, he has to be aware of all the exits and kind of have his back to the wall and just can't be in indoor spaces for very long. And that comes out more in the earlier books. He's starting to get better than he used to be, and now he is actually living in a house with June, his girlfriend, journalist girlfriend from Milwaukee. Actually, I don't know if she's from. They're living in Milwaukee in this book. They kind of move around a lot because of things he gets into, and he's wanted for a while because, um, well, I won't go into I won't go into the different plots in different books, but anyway, at this point, things have calmed down. He is living in Milwaukee with June. They live in a really nice house with lots of windows, which is good for him. That he can feel more like he's outdoors, and just be outdoors a lot too. And they live down the street from his best friend Lewis, who is a former bank robber who was never caught, but he's reformed now. He also lives with girlfriend and her two boys, and there's a great sense of protection, which I know is really old fashioned, but I like it. It feels comforting that these men are protecting their family. They protect their friends and their family, which is what they consider their girlfriends and the two boys that Lewis is kind of a surrogate father to now. So this series, I really love it. Every book has been different than the others because they like happen in different places. There's a totally different plot, but it's those same characters. And June has been there, I think, since the first book, and she is not to be messed with. She doesn't really need a lot of protection. She does pretty well on her own, which I really like too. She's a very strong female character. Um, but overall, these books, I would call them thrillers. They've been compared to Jason Bourne and Jack Reacher, those characters, very favorably. I think he even had a blurb from the Jack Reacher author whose name is escaping me. Lee Child, is that it? Um, on his latest book. So he's doing really well. These books are getting more and more popular. And so in this one, they are meeting June. Lewis and Peter are going to meet June at like a farmer's market type thing. And June has noticed this guy walking through the farmer's market, and she's like, there's something wrong about him. And Lewis immediately notices like the telltale bulge of a gun, a big gun. And so they're a little worried about this character. Like, is he gonna go off and start shooting people in the farmer's market? That would be bad. So they start following Peter and Lewis. And what happens is they interrupt like a kind of a robbery. This guy is meeting someone else, and he like takes his phone at gunpoint and does something, and then chucks it back. So he doesn't even keep the phone. So they don't really know what's going on, but they're not satisfied when both of them disappear, the victim of the robbery and the gunman. Now, no one gets hurt at the farmer's market, so that's good. But they're not satisfied with just letting that go. And neither is June, because she recognizes the so-called victim of this robbery. After he disappears, she starts trying to look him up. And she figures out that he is a tech, like high tech, on the cutting edge. I don't know if he's an investor, but he's like, one of the guys to watch, or was 10 years ago. And then he kind of fell off the map. And so she's wondering what's going on with him now, and she's trying to track him down, and for some reason it's very difficult to track him down. So she's looking into that, and then meanwhile, there's the story of, okay, I can't remember her name, but there's this very young woman who used to work for this guy who June recognized, and he stole her technology. He like said he decided not to use it, but then he stole it. And she tried to fight back, and he sued her, and he had people following her, and like her parents got into a terrible car accident because people were following them, and they died in this car accident. So it's kind of his fault that her parents are dead. So now she's trying to kind of lay low, but she's also wanting revenge on this guy. And so she's planning, she has some kind of plan. You don't know all the details at first. But they come to light eventually, because things kind of come together with this attack in the farmer's market and the stolen technology. And then there's a couple other things going on, like suddenly there's this psychopath guy who's the cheerful assassin is what they kind of call him after a while. He is killing people and he's always smiling, and he like introduces himself. Hi, I'm Larry, or whatever his name is, I don't remember. Um and acts like he's your friend, but then he's trying to kill you. And he just loves his job being an assassin. And so he is trying to kill June. And Peter and Lewis are trying to protect her, obviously, and figure out who this guy is working for. And so it all, comes together much better than in that other book I told you about a minute ago. Yeah, the details come together. He's really good at pacing and giving you enough clues that you feel like you're participating in solving the mystery. It's just really fun. It's a thriller, I would say, and it's very satisfying. It's like there's a lot of over the top things happening, which that's kind of like a thriller. It was really fun to listen to, and there's this one scene that reminds me of the truck chase in Indiana Jones, where Indy is like crawling below the truck, holding on to the bottom undercarriage of the truck to get to the Nazi driving the truck. It reminded me of that, although in this one they're on top of the truck and it's a driverless vehicle. It's really fun, like with the cutting edge technology, some things that are going to sound familiar, but we're like not quite there yet in the real world. But you can tell he does his research and finds some really fun stuff to play with in these thrillers. The young girl, well, I shouldn't call her girl, the young woman who invented this technology, it's like a clean energy source that was stolen. That's really fun to read about or to listen to, the descriptions of the way this energy source works, and it's just really a satisfying, entertaining, fun read. I would recommend it if you like anything like the Jason Bourne type stories, then you would like this, definitely. And I don't like Jack Reacher. I think he's a jerk of a character. He's cold. He doesn't have any feelings. He's kind of an old-fashioned hero, I guess. Not in a good way, I think. And so I really like Peter Ash. He can be vulnerable. He is not a chauvinist pig. He's very enlightened when it comes to his relationship with June. He's just a very sympathetic character. So yeah, it's a fun plot. There's sympathetic characters you care about, and there's at least 5 more. Actually, I think there's another one after the 6th one that's already been published. So yeah, I would give that one definite thumbs up. It was a lot of fun. Okay, and the third book that I read, or in this case I listened to, was The Tenant by Katrine Engberg. And okay, here's Winnie. Want to say hello to the peoples? We have a new dog too. That's another thing that's been going on. And we're still getting the doggies to get along. Sometimes they're just fine, and then sometimes, usually it's Winnie. starts getting defensive and maybe a little scared because the other dog is big. She's 45 pounds and probably will get bigger. Not because she's a puppy. We didn't get a puppy. But because she's kind of underweight. Well, very underweight right now. Because she was a rescue and found like in a park, living in a park, and obviously hadn't had enough to eat for a while. Her ribs are showing. So we're trying to fatten her up. And things are going pretty well, but yeah, we gotta keep an eye on them still. Make sure they don't get in a tussle. Right? You're a good girl. Yeah. Okay, so the Tenant, I kind of found this accidentally, but it looked interesting, so I thought I'd give it a try. It is a police procedural. It's Danish. The author is also a famous actress, evidently. And so this was a bestseller. It's her first book, but it's a bestseller. And it's the start of a series about this couple, this pair of detectives who work in Copenhagen. Jeppe Kerner and Annette Werner. I hope I pronounced that right. Jeppe is just divorced recently and he's depressed. He doesn't have any children, unlike the other book where the psychologist was divorced and depressed. No, he's just depressed because he still loves his wife, and his wife left him for someone else. So, and then his partner, Annette, is happily married, which is a nice, refreshing character to have, a police detective who's happy. It seems like it's kind of unusual, at least in American police shows, I think, and books. Okay, so the case that they are working is the murder of this young woman, and it seems like a very personal attack because of the way she was murdered, and that the murderer, like, cut up her face after she died, and they're trying to figure out like what that means, if there's some significance to the way that he cut her. Yeah, and just like who in her life would be awful enough to do this, because she seems like she hasn't been alive long enough to make enemies of that sort. She's in her 20s, she's going to school, to college, and then she lives in this apartment building with these really interesting characters, especially the landlady, who is a retired college professor, and she still has lots of connections with academia, and so she will have dinners with, lots of smart people, smart, interesting people. And sometimes this woman, Julie, or Julia, she would help with the dinners, like, serving the food and stuff like that. So it wasn't a case where the neighbors didn't know each other. They knew each other pretty well. And so the detectives have to figure out the connections between this young woman and sort of all the other lives that she touched, and who would want to attack her, because it seems very unlikely at first that she would have been someone who was attacked, especially on a personal level. So the landlady, Esther De Laurenti, which is a great fancy pants name, I love it. She has these raucous dinner parties with her artist friends, and so the police detectives have to talk to all these different artist friends, and pretty quickly we find out that Esther is writing a novel. She's trying her hand at writing now that she's retired. And so she's in this writers group with these two other writers, and they like share their stuff through Google Docs or something like that online. And it turns out that Esther's novel is a murder mystery, and the scene that she wrote of her victim being murdered is the same way that Julia was murdered. And so, everybody's trying to figure out, well, how did the killer get access to Esther's unpublished draft of her novel when only two other people have seen it? So that's interesting. And then there's like another character, Christophe, who seems to be almost Esther's caretaker. They have a really interesting friendship. He's much younger than her. He's like Julia's age. Yeah, I should be saying Julia, not Julia. Anyway, Christophe sounds like, the way he's described, he sounds like he's on the spectrum. And yet, he's also they never use the word autism or the phrase on the spectrum. They just treat him like he's odd, which I did not like. I thought, why are they not just, figuring this out? Oh, that's why he doesn't have any social skills, or, just certain behaviors that are dead giveaways for somebody who's on the spectrum. So that was a weird part, but he was a really interesting character too. He's like a brilliant songwriter, but he also does not want to work in the conventional way, and so he kind of is supported a little bit by Esther, and he works for Esther, helping take care of things for her. Esther drinks a little too much. And that's part of the story too. And it's also kind of about aging, because, Esther is aging, and then she has another tenant who actually discovered the body of Julia, who is older, and he has a heart attack when he discovers her. It's sad. But, his main concern when he wakes up in the hospital is that Julia was already dead, that there was nothing he could have done, because he feels terrible if maybe she was still alive and he went and had a heart attack and didn't help her. But no, she was already dead. So there's that character, and he and Esther kind of bond a little bit more than they had in the past. They get to know each other a little more because of the situation. They're sort of brought closer together because of this tragedy. And so I really enjoyed this book. I think I will follow the series, and you know, listen to the next ones in the series because I really like the characters. The two detectives are interesting people. Um, so yeah, I would give that one another thumbs up. The Tenant by Katrine Engberg. So those are the 3 books that I've read in the last, I don't know, 3 weeks. Um, it's been rough, but I think most of the concussion stuff is behind me. I realize it's frustrating, but I just cannot commit to like a weekly thing. There's too many things in life that keep interfering. So, you know, I'm just going to do it when I finish a couple books. Then I'll make another video and tell you about those. And we'll see how that works. I think it'll work okay. I'm just disappointed I can't do it every week, but there it is, you know. You work with what you got. So I hope you guys enjoyed this. I will put the book information down in the description box in case you want to check any of these out. Especially The Breaker. That one was my favorite by Nick Petrie. I highly recommend him. He was a lot of fun. Okay, guys, thanks for hanging out with me and Winnie. And we will just see you in the next video.